In the past year, while I was having political arguments with people, I noticed that I'm getting a strong sense of déjà vu. When arguing with people from the regressive left, I could swear I encountered their logic before, that I already had these arguments. Racking my brains to remember where I already met these regressives, I realized that what I was remembering was arguments I had a decade before, but then it wasn't the regressive left. It was the Neocons. The Neocons were a group that dominated right-wing American politics in the previous decade, made of liberals who broke away from the pacifism of the left and adopted a more aggressive approach, and conservatives who broke away from the isolationism of the right and adopted a more globalist approach. They were mainly known for their belief that the West had a moral obligation to use its power to overthrow dictators and help nations living under despotic rule become free. This led to the invasion of Iraq in 2003, and the Neocons truly believed that they were doing the right and ethical thing, which will lead to the establishment of democracy in Iraq and subsequently in the rest of the Middle East. The religious right claimed that they were being foolish, because Arabs will never be able to form a free society, but the Neocons replied that this was a racist position, and Arabs are just as humans as we are, so there's no reason why Arab nations couldn't become democratic when given a chance. This argument held a lot of sway back in the day, and drowned the counter-argument that liberals like me were making, namely, that the Neocon position was also racist, because it expected from the Arabs to do something that no humans have ever achieved before. Yes, other nations have become democratic free societies, so it was reasonable to expect the Iraqis could do the same. But no nation has ever just switched overnight from a tradition of despotic rule to a free society. It was always a long process that took decades and even centuries. The Neocons generally admitted it will take time, but claimed it will be just a few years. This went against anything we knew about human nature and history. All we have to do is look at the history of Europe. But even before Europe overthrew its dictators, it was already understood that it would take a long time before a truly free society would take their place. The great philosophers of the Enlightenment, like Rousseau, Kant and Hegel, have all agreed that changing the system isn't enough, and we also need to change the culture, change the way people think. People must become enlightened before a free society can emerge, and this process of enlightenment is a long and arduous one. Here's what Immanuel Kant had to say about it, way back in the 18th century. A public can achieve enlightenment only slowly. A revolution may bring about the end of a personal despotism or of avaricious tyrannical oppression, but never a true reform of modes of thought. New prejudices will serve, in place of the old, as guidelines for the unthinking multitude. So expecting the Iraqi people to be able to create a free society after you overthrow Saddam Hussein was to expect of them to achieve what Europeans never achieved, what the philosophers of enlightenment already warned us was impossible. This is what I told the liberal Neocons. When arguing with conservative Neocons, I told them, I realize that you don't have much respect for the philosophers of enlightenment, but read your fucking Bible. The Torah shows very well how the Israelites, after escaping slavery in Egypt, were incapable of mentally escaping slavery, and kept on thinking like slaves. Moses eventually realizes that they must remain in the desert for 40 years before they are mentally prepared to conquer the land of Israel and become sovereign nation. So even 3,000 years ago, when that story was written, whoever wrote that story already knew that it takes at least 40 years, 2 generations, for a nation to switch from the mentality of slaves to the mentality of free folk. And the same rule still applies today. You need at least 2 generations to switch from the mentality of living under dictatorship to the mentality of people in a free society. I asked the Neocons if they thought that the US was prepared to stay in Iraq for 40 years, because that's the minimal time it would take to achieve their goal. Unfortunately, our voices were drowned, as the Neocons kept on promising that it would be easy to bring democracy to Iraq.
There was a time when many said that the cultures of Japan and Germany were incapable of sustaining democratic values. Some say the same of Iraq today. They are mistaken. The nation of Iraq, with its proud heritage, abundant resources, and skilled and educated people, is fully capable of moving toward democracy and living in freedom.
Yes, there is a great risk of American blood and treasure, but I do not believe that we would experience much difficulty in bringing about a regime change.
We would be seen as liberators in Iraq.
You met with Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld. Special briefing on Thursday, very interesting, a lot of good information, especially about post-Saddam, post-regime time. What are we going to do then? It's a very well laid out plan.
Yes, we liberals were mistaken, as George Bush so smugly declared. And whenever we tried to argue our side, what we essentially got was this.
Whose side are you on, son?
Our side, sir.
Don't you love your country?
Yes, sir.
Then how about getting with the program? Why don't you jump on the team and come on in for the big win?
Yes, sir.
Son, all I've ever asked of my Marines is for them to obey my orders as they would the word of God. We are here to help the Vietnamese because inside every gook there is an American trying to get out.
Different war, same logic. The Neocons believed that to be humanist means that you believe that every human is essentially the same, which for them meant that inside every Iraqi there's an American trying to get out. So it was just the oppressive system they were under that made the Iraqis what they were, and if we just change that system they will become like Americans. What they fail to understand is that while it is true that all humans want freedom, not all humans are ready for it. The maintenance of a free society is possible only if the members of that society act with responsibility, a responsibility that is second nature to those who grew up in a free society, but takes a long time to learn to those who did not. So at most you can say that inside every Iraqi there's a potential American trying to get out, but it would take decades before he succeeds. The Neocons failed to understand this distinction, and that mistake led the US into that unholy mess known as the Iraq War. By now, thankfully, everyone understands what a disaster the Iraq War was, and the Neocons are discredited. But now we have a new problem. Muslim immigrants are flooding the West, and Western societies have to deal with people who have a non-democratic mentality. Now, this is of course a problem with every immigrant group. It takes 2 generations until they fully integrate into the new society, and during this period there are always some problems. So as liberals we cut them some slack, and defend them from racists. The Muslim immigrants of today, however, present something else. First, there are forces within them that are actively working against integration. Secondly, the problems they create are on a different level than other immigrant groups, and include terrorist attacks and mass rapes. Third, they come in larger masses than usual immigrant waves. All of this requires the development of a different approach, and we are trying to have a discussion about it, but this discussion is being thwarted by the regressive left. And when you try to figure out why the regressives are acting like they do, you realize that they are driven by the same logic that drove the Neocons. To illustrate, let's take this infamous video by the Young Turks, which is a discussion of the incident in Cologne where dozens of women were sexually attacked by a mob of Muslim immigrants who were playing a game of mass rape popular in the Arab world. The video has been called a regressive masterpiece. I call it a regressive fugue. It is a fugue in the sense that we have 4 different voices joining the conversation one after the other, and every voice is pitched slightly more regressive than the previous one. The result has to be heard to be believed. What Bach's Toccata and Fugue in D minor was to 18th century music, this video is to the regressive left thinking of today.
Yes, that's said here.
It's said
It
here.
is said here, and every time
Right,
no, that you were asking for it, it was your fault. Said here.
The first voice belongs to Anna Kasparian, and she is actually making sense, for a while.
It's a nuanced, complex issue, and there are extremists on both sides. There are those who are like, no, 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 they're all innocent. There's nothing wrong. They're not doing anything wrong. And then there are those who are like, no, 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 they're Muslim. Just because they're Muslim, they're all bad. No, it's way more nuanced than that. It's indisputable that there are certain expectations for women, and the expectation is be modest, cover up, because if you're not covered, well, then you're asking for it. And when you have that kind of thought process, well, you need to learn real quick when you're going to go to a different country that has different values.
So Anna does understand that there is middle ground between believing Muslims are incorrigible barbarians and believing that they are the same as Western people. They come from a different culture, and it will take time until they learn to behave according to Western culture. But all the nuance that Anna is trying to introduce into the conversation is quickly drowned by the other voices.
What we are is we're progressives. So what do progressives do? Progressives always are looking to see who's being oppressed. And who's ever being oppressed, that's who I'm in favor of, right?
Right.
So if an Israeli soldier oppresses a Palestinian, I'm in favor of the Palestinian. The Palestinian goes home and then oppresses his wife, I'm for his wife. Yeah. So I'm for who's ever being oppressed in any situation. This idea, though, but the whole idea is that these guys are dirty, right? Muslims are dirtier, they're worse, they're not reformed, all that stuff, right? So it's that it's okay to be racist towards them.
There you go. That's the regressive mindset. For the regressive leftists, there are only 2 possible modes. Either you are a racist who believes that Muslims are a different kind of human from us, or you understand that they are humans just like us, and their behavior is all due to the system. Their culture has no relation to their bad behavior. The only reason for it is that they are oppressed. In other words, we are back to the logic of the Neocons. All you have to do is remove the oppression, and the Muslims will become like us. The difference is that while the Neocons could blame Saddam Hussein for the oppression, Regressives have to find other culprits.
What happened in Cologne as a larger, we're talking a global patriarchy issue, right? Where women are treated like property, and depending on what they're wearing, there's all sorts of judgments made about what they're inviting sexually.
Yep.
But this story is so frustrating because I think we all know, and Anna, what you were saying is that it's going to be used as a cudgel to sort of like beat the same old drum of racism and bigotry about the people from the Middle East that are these refugees.
By the end of the video, the point Anna made at first about the immigrants' retrograde customs is completely forgotten. The consensus that emerges is that it is the global patriarchy that is responsible for the Cologne incident, and the same patriarchy is also trying to use the event to turn us against the immigrants. So we must protect the Muslims from these vile Islamophobes, and silence anyone who suggests that there is a problem with their culture. Meanwhile, the women of Germany, which for some reason were never attacked this way by the global patriarchy before, are left to live in fear. The one-dimensional logic of the Neocons has led to the Iraq War, and we paid a heavy price before we defeated it. Now that it is brought back into our discourse by the regressive left, what horrors will we have to endure until we defeat it again?